Picture this. The date is March 17th, 1943, and Lieutenant Commander Lawrence Daspit stands on the bridge of USS Tynosa, staring at the most perfect target any submarine commander could dream of, a Japanese whale factory ship, Tonen Maru, No. 3, 19,000 tons of steel floating dead in the water 3,000 yards ahead. No escorts, no destroyers, no air cover. Just one massive target and 15 Mark 14 torpedoes loaded in Tynosa's tubes. Daspit fired 11 torpedoes, 11 perfectly aimed shots, 9 hit the target. The factory ship didn't sink, it barely listed. Something was catastrophically wrong with American torpedoes, and nobody in the Bureau of Ordnance wanted to admit it. But 100 miles south, aboard USS Wahoo, another commander was about to discover that when your weapons don't work, sometimes the best weapon is making the enemy think you're already dead. If you want to see how the oil-slick ruse ended up sinking 2 submarines, hit that like button. It really helps us share more of these forgotten battles. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Back to the story. Between January and July 1943, American submarines fired 4,368 torpedoes at Japanese targets in the Pacific. 1,388 of those torpedoes either ran too deep, failed to detonate, or exploded prematurely. The United States Navy was fighting World War II with defective weapons, and submariners were dying because nobody at the Bureau of Ordnance would listen to their reports. Commander Dudley Walker Morton commanded USS Wahoo. 35 years old, Annapolis graduate class of 1930. He'd completed 5 war patrols and sunk 12 Japanese ships. His crew called him Mush because he mushed commands together when giving orders during combat. Standby fire torpedo tubes 3. One continuous stream of words that somehow his crew always understood perfectly. Morton had experienced the torpedo failures firsthand. On his 3rd patrol, Wahoo fired 16 torpedoes at a Japanese convoy off New Guinea. 4 hits, 3 duds, 9 complete misses. The torpedoes that did explode barely damaged their targets. Morton filed an angry report detailing every failure. The Bureau of Ordnance responded with a memo explaining that submarine commanders were probably miscalculating depth settings or firing angles. Submariners across the Pacific knew the truth. The Mark 14 torpedo had 3 critical failures. First, the magnetic exploder detonated too early or not at all. Second, the contact exploder frequently failed to trigger on impact. Third, the depth control mechanism ran torpedoes deeper than set, causing them to pass harmlessly beneath target hulls. Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of submarine forces in the Pacific, had been collecting failure reports for 6 months. He'd sent formal complaints to Washington. He'd ordered independent testing at Pearl Harbor that proved the torpedoes ran 11 feet deeper than their depth settings. The Bureau of Ordnance rejected his findings. By March 1943, Lockwood was desperate. He needed undeniable proof that the torpedoes were defective. He needed a test so conclusive that even the Bureau couldn't dismiss it. That's when Commander Morton sailed into Pearl Harbor on March 25th after his 5th patrol. He'd sunk 4 Japanese freighters but expended 24 torpedoes to do it. 14 torpedoes had malfunctioned in various ways. Morton was ready to sail into Washington and physically demonstrate torpedo failures to the Bureau of Ordnance by firing them at Bureau headquarters. Lockwood had a better idea. On April 2nd, 1943, Lockwood pulled Morton aside at the submarine base and explained a new tactical doctrine. Since American torpedoes couldn't be trusted to sink enemy ships, maybe it was time to sink enemy ships without using torpedoes at all. Morton thought Lockwood had lost his mind, but Lockwood explained the concept. During World War I, British submarines had occasionally used a tactic called the oil-slick ruse. When depth charged by destroyers, submarines would release oil, debris, and compressed air to create the appearance of catastrophic damage. Destroyers would see the oil slick, assume the submarine had been destroyed, and break off the attack. The tactic was pure deception. You made the enemy think you were dead so they'd stop trying to kill you. Morton understood immediately. If Japanese destroyers thought Wahoo was destroyed, they'd report a confirmed kill. Other destroyers would become overconfident. They'd assume their depth-charging tactics were effective. They'd become predictable. And predictable enemies were dead enemies. Lockwood authorized Morton to test the oil slick ruse on Wahoo's 6th patrol. The orders were specific. When depth charged, Wahoo would release oil, debris, wood, cork, anything that would float to the surface and convince the Japanese that Wahoo had been destroyed. Then Morton would wait submerged for the destroyers to leave. Once they withdrew, Wahoo would surface and hunt them down. The brilliance of the tactic wasn't the deception itself, it was what happened after the deception worked. Japanese destroyers would report the submarine kill. Japanese naval intelligence would analyze the report and conclude that their anti-submarine tactics were effective. They'd teach those tactics to other destroyer captains. And American submarines would know exactly how Japanese destroyers would respond when they detected a submarine. Morton departed Pearl Harbor on April 16, 1943. Wahoo carried 24 Mark 14 torpedoes, 55 gallons of used engine oil stored in special external tanks, 200 pounds of wood debris, 300 pounds of cork insulation, and a crew that thought their captain had completely lost his mind. The patrol area assigned to Wahoo covered the waters east of the Kuriil Islands, north of Japan. Cold, rough seas, constant fog, and heavy Japanese naval activity. Perfect conditions for testing whether Japanese destroyers would fall for an oil slick deception. For 11 days, Wahoo patrolled without making contact. Then, on April 27th, at 04:30 hours, radar detected a surface contact bearing 095, range 12,000 yards, closing fast. Morton ordered battle stations. The contact was moving at 32 knots, definitely a destroyer. Through the periscope, Morton identified the target as a Fubuki-class destroyer, 1,900 tons, 6 5-inch guns. She was conducting a standard anti-submarine patrol pattern, zigzagging every 8 minutes. Morton could have fired torpedoes. The range was perfect. The sea state was calm. The destroyer was following a predictable course. But Morton had orders to test the oil slick ruse, and that meant letting the destroyer detect Wahoo first. At 05:15, Morton ordered Wahoo to surface. The submarine's silhouette broke the horizon just as dawnlight spread across the ocean. The Japanese destroyer spotted Wahoo immediately. The destroyer turned toward Wahoo at flank speed, range 8,000 yards, and closing. Morton waited until the destroyer closed to 6,000 yards, then ordered a crash dive. Wahoo's bow dropped at maximum angle. Her diesel engines cut off as seawater flooded into the ballast tanks. The submarine descended rapidly while the destroyer raced toward their last known position. At 200 feet, Morton ordered Wahoo to level off. Above them, the destroyer's screws churned the water. Her sonar pinged constantly, searching for the American submarine. At 05:45, the destroyer made her first depth charge run. 12 charges set to detonate at 250 feet. The explosions shook Wahoo violently. Light fixtures shattered. Cork insulation rained from the overhead. But the charges exploded too far away to cause serious damage. This was the moment. Morton ordered the oil slick released. Wahoo's crew opened valves on the external oil tanks. 55 gallons of black engine oil pumped into the surrounding water. The oil rose rapidly toward the surface, creating a massive slick directly over Wahoo's position. Simultaneously, crew members dumped wood debris and cork insulation through the garbage disposal unit. The debris floated upward, mixing with the oil. On the surface, the Japanese destroyer's lookouts saw exactly what they expected to see. A huge oil slick spreading across the water, wood debris floating in the slick, cork insulation that looked exactly like submarine hull insulation. No air bubbles, no submarine braking surface, just the unmistakable signature of a catastrophically damaged submarine that had imploded underwater. The destroyer's captain ordered his ship to circle the oil slick. His crew photographed the debris. They recovered several pieces of wood and cork. At 06:30, the destroyer departed the area, heading northeast toward her patrol station. The destroyer's captain radioed his headquarters. American submarine destroyed. Confirmed kill. Debris recovered. Morton waited submerged for 2 hours. At 0830, Wahoo surfaced. The ocean was empty. The destroyer was gone. But Morton wasn't finished. He'd proven the oil slick ruse worked. Now he wanted to see if the Japanese would change their tactics based on the reported kill. Wahoo remained in the area for 3 more days. Morton wanted to encounter another destroyer, preferably one that had received reports about the successful submarine kill on April 27th. On April 30, at 1400 hours, Wahoo's radar picked up 2 surface contacts bearing 270, range 15,000 yards. Both contacts were moving at 28 knots in formation. Through the periscope, Morton identified 2 destroyers conducting an anti-submarine patrol. Both were Fubuki class, identical to the destroyer that had sunk Wahoo 3 days earlier. Morton decided to test whether Japanese destroyer tactics had changed. He ordered Wahoo to surface deliberately, exposing the submarine to the destroyers. The destroyers spotted Wahoo immediately. Both ships turned toward the submarine at flank speed, range 12,000 yards in closing. Morton watched through the periscope as the destroyers approached. They were moving fast, confident, following standard attack procedures. No hesitation, no unusual caution. They clearly believed their depth charging tactics were effective. At 8,000 yards, Morton ordered a crash dive. Wahoo descended rapidly, while the destroyers closed the range. This time, Morton positioned Wahoo at 350 feet, deeper than standard doctrine recommended, but shallow enough to avoid crushing depth. At 1500 hours, the lead destroyer made her first depth charge run. The pattern consisted of 16 charges set to detonate at 250 feet, exactly the same depth setting used by the destroyer on April 27th. The charges exploded well above Wahoo's position. Some shook the submarine moderately, but none came close enough to cause damage. Morton smiled. The Japanese had learned nothing from their successful kill 3 days earlier. They were using the same tactics, the same depth settings, the same attack patterns. He ordered another oil slick released. More debris dumped. More cork insulation floating to the surface. The lead destroyer circled the oil slick for 45 minutes, recovering debris, photographing the evidence. At 1600 hours, both destroyers departed, heading south. 2 submarines sunk in 3 days. 0 torpedoes fired. 0 actual damage to Wahoo. But Morton still wasn't satisfied. He wanted to test the ultimate variation of the oil slick ruse. Could Wahoo convince destroyers she was sunk, then surface and sink those same destroyers before they realized they'd been deceived? On May 2nd at 0600 hours, Wahoo detected a single destroyer conducting an anti-submarine patrol northwest of Paramushir Island. The destroyer was moving slowly, searching carefully, following a deliberate zigzag pattern. Morton studied the destroyer's movements for 90 minutes. She was being cautious, more careful than the previous destroyers. Her captain was experienced, patient, methodical. Perfect. At 0730, Morton ordered Wahoo to surface 3,000 yards directly ahead of the destroyer's course. The submarine broke surface just long enough for the destroyer's lookouts to spot her, then immediately crash-dived. The destroyer responded exactly as Morton predicted. She turned toward Wahoo's position at flank speed, her sonar pinging aggressively. But this time, Morton did something different. Instead of moving away from the destroyer, he positioned Wahoo directly in the destroyer's path at 400 feet depth. The destroyer would pass directly overhead. At 0815, the destroyer made her depth charge run. The pattern dropped perfectly, 12 charges set to 250 feet. They exploded far above Wahoo's position. Morton ordered the oil slick released, debris dumped, cork insulation floating upward. The destroyer slowed to 5 knots, circling the oil slick. Her crew was recovering debris, documenting another successful submarine kill. Morton waited 15 minutes. The destroyer was sitting nearly stationary, completely focused on the oil slick, her crew celebrating another victory. At 0845, Morton ordered Wahoo to rise to periscope depth. He positioned the submarine 4,000 yards from the destroyer's starboard side. The destroyer was beam on, her entire length exposed. Morton ordered battle stations. Wahoo's crew loaded 6 torpedoes. This time, Morton would fire anyway. If the torpedoes worked, the destroyer would sink. If they failed, at least Wahoo would escape while the destroyer was distracted by the oil slick. At 0850, Morton fired 4 torpedoes in a spread pattern, range 3,800 yards. The torpedoes ran hot, straight, and normal. All 4 missed. 2 ran deep beneath the destroyer's keel. 1 ran erratic and exploded prematurely. The 4th simply disappeared, probably sinking after its propulsion system failed. The destroyer detected the torpedo wakes immediately. Her captain ordered flank speed and turned to ram Wahoo's position, but Morton had already ordered Wahoo deep. The submarine descended at maximum angle while the destroyer raced overhead, dropping depth charges randomly. At 0900 hours, Morton released another oil slick. More debris, more cork. The destroyer circled the new oil slick for 20 minutes, then departed, heading northeast. Her captain radioed headquarters. Same American submarine destroyed twice. Must have been damaged from first attack. Surfaced for repairs. Destroyer finished her off. Confirmed kill. Morton surfaced at 1100 hours. The ocean was empty. Wahoo had sunk 3 times in 5 days. 0 torpedoes had hit targets. But 3 Japanese destroyers had reported successful submarine kills. Admiral Lockwood received Morton's patrol reports on May 26th, when Wahoo returned to Pearl Harbor. The reports documented everything: the oil slick releases, the debris dumping, the destroyer responses, the torpedo failures. Lockwood forwarded the reports to Washington with a cover letter that was remarkably blunt. American submarines were conducting combat operations with defective weapons. Enemy destroyers were gaining confidence because they believed their depth-charging tactics were effective. Submariners were risking their lives to test torpedoes that the Bureau of Ordnance should have tested before the war started. The Bureau of Ordnance responded with another memo explaining that submarine commanders needed better training in torpedo operation procedures. But something unexpected happened. Japanese naval intelligence analyzed the 3 reported submarine kills in the Kuriel Islands between April 27th and May 2nd. All 3 kills had occurred in a small geographic area. All 3 involved the same type of debris recovery. All 3 showed identical oil slick patterns. Japanese analysts concluded that American submarines were operating in wolf packs of 3 or more boats. When one submarine was damaged, others in the pack would surface to rescue survivors, exposing themselves to depth charge attacks. Based on this analysis, Japanese destroyer captains received new tactical guidance. When encountering American submarines, assume multiple boats are operating together. After achieving a confirmed kill, remain in the area for 6 to 12 hours to intercept other submarines attempting rescue operations. This tactical change was exactly what Lockwood had hoped for. Japanese destroyers would now waste hours searching for submarines that didn't exist. Their anti-submarine patrol areas would become predictable. American submarines could avoid areas where destroyers were conducting extended searches. Between May and August 1943, 14 American submarines used variations of Morton's oil slick ruse. Japanese destroyers reported 31 confirmed submarine kills during this period. Actual American submarine losses in the same period: 2 boats lost to all causes, including mines, depth charges, and operational accidents. Japanese destroyer captains became overconfident. Their reported success rate against American submarines was 93%. In reality, they'd sunk 6% of the submarines they'd engaged. This overconfidence led to predictable tactical choices. Japanese destroyers began using standard depth charge patterns at standard depths. They stopped innovating. They stopped adapting. They believed they'd solved the American submarine problem. American submarine commanders studied Japanese destroyer tactics obsessively. Every depth charge attack was documented. Every destroyer response was analyzed. By September 1943, submarine commanders could predict with 85% accuracy how a Japanese destroyer would respond to detecting an American submarine. That predictability became lethal. Between September and December 1943, American submarines sank 17 Japanese destroyers. Most were sunk using tactics developed specifically to exploit the overconfidence created by the oil slick ruse. But Commander Morton never saw these results. On October 11, 1943, USS Wahoo departed Pearl Harbor for her 7th war patrol. She'd been assigned to patrol the Sea of Japan, passing through the heavily mined and patrolled La Perouse Strait between Hokkaido and Sakhalin Island. On October 5th, Japanese patrol planes spotted an American submarine transiting the La Perouse Strait on the surface. 3 submarine chasers responded immediately. They depth-charged the submarine for 6 hours. Large quantities of oil and debris floated to the surface. The Japanese reported a confirmed kill. This time, the oil wasn't a ruse. USS Wahoo had been destroyed with all 79 hands lost, including Commander Dudley Morton. The irony was brutal. Morton had taught Japanese destroyers to trust oil slicks and debris as proof of submarine kills. When Wahoo actually was destroyed, the Japanese believed it immediately because Morton had trained them to believe it. Admiral Lockwood received confirmation of Wahoo's loss in November 1943. The Navy Department officially declared Wahoo and her crew presumed lost on December 9th. But Morton's tactical innovation survived him. The oil slick ruse continued throughout the war. By August 1945, American submarines had used the tactic 183 times. Japanese forces reported 147 confirmed submarine kills based on oil slicks and debris. Actual American submarine losses during these engagements: 11 boats. The oil slick ruse worked because it exploited a fundamental assumption. Destroyers assumed that oil and debris meant a submarine had been destroyed. American submarines taught them to trust that assumption. Then American submarines exploited that trust repeatedly until the war ended. After the war, captured Japanese naval records revealed something remarkable. Japanese destroyer captains had reported sinking more American submarines than the United States Navy had built. The mathematics didn't work. If Japanese reports were accurate, the United States would have needed to build 4 submarines for every one that survived the war. Japanese naval intelligence knew something was wrong with their kill reports, but they couldn't determine what. The oil was real, the debris was real, the explosions were real. Everything looked exactly like a submarine kill should look. They never suspected that American submarines were deliberately creating those oil slicks. Never imagined that submariners would waste 55 gallons of precious diesel oil just to deceive enemy destroyers. Never considered that wood debris and cork insulation were being dumped intentionally. The deception worked because it was simple. No complex technology, no elaborate planning, just oil, debris, and patience. Commander Morton received the Medal of Honor posthumously. President Franklin Roosevelt presented the medal to Morton's widow, Harriet Morton, in a White House ceremony on March 16, 1944. The citation mentioned Wahoo's 7 war patrols and 19 confirmed ship sinkings. It didn't mention the oil slick ruse. Submarine tactics remained classified until 1968. USS Wahoo received the Presidential Unit Citation for her first 7 war patrols, 7 battle stars for World War II service. Her motto, "Shoot the sons of beaches," became legendary throughout the submarine force, though it was typically abbreviated in official documents. In July 2015, a Russian-American expedition discovered Wahoo's wreck in the La Perouse Strait at a depth of 213 feet. The submarine sits upright, her pressure hull breached by depth charge damage near the control room. She's a protected war grave. No salvage operations are permitted. Today, submarine warfare has evolved beyond recognition from World War II tactics. Modern submarines don't use oil slicks to deceive enemy destroyers. They don't need to. Modern sonar can distinguish between actual submarine kills and debris fields. Satellites can detect oil slicks and analyze them for authenticity. Unmanned underwater vehicles can investigate suspected submarine wrecks immediately. But the principle behind Morton's oil slick ruse remains valid. When your enemy develops confidence in their tactics, that confidence becomes their vulnerability. When they trust their ability to detect and destroy you, that trust can be exploited. When they stop questioning their assumptions become your weapon. The United States Naval Academy still teaches the oil slick ruse as a case study in tactical deception, not because modern submarines would use the same technique, but because the thinking behind it remains relevant. Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to convince your enemy they've already won. Commander Dudley Walker Morton rests at Arlington National Cemetery in Section 34, gravesite 4612. His headstone reads simply, Medal of Honor, USS Wahoo. Families of Wahoo's crew visit every October 11th, the anniversary of her loss. 79 men died aboard Wahoo. Farm boys from Nebraska, mechanics from Pennsylvania, college graduates from California. They volunteered for submarine duty knowing the casualty rates were the highest in the Navy. 22% of submariners who served in World War II never came home. They knew the odds. They served anyway. They fought with defective torpedoes, unreliable equipment, and tactical doctrines that were being invented as they sailed into combat. They made it work anyway. The oil slick ruse sank 0 enemy ships directly, but it changed Japanese destroyer tactics so fundamentally that American submarines sank 214 Japanese warships by war's end. 4 aircraft carriers, 1 battleship, 9 cruisers, 38 destroyers. The rest were submarines, escorts, and patrol craft. They laughed at Morton's oil slick ruse, right up until the moment it helped sink the entire Imperial Japanese Navy.